Friends, I want to welcome you again to this YouTube program, which is called Walking with God in the Garden. I've been spending a lot of time in the garden because it's harvest time. And in fact, I've enjoyed it so much that I even have a chair placed in my garden that I can simply sit in and survey the entire garden. I've suggested that we have a garden, each of us, that God has created for us. He's placed us in this garden. Mine, of course, is more than just a geographical area. It includes my home and everything about where I dwell. That includes what I read, what I watch on television, the people who are visiting in my home, every task that I have. It's all a part of my garden. But as I think of my garden, that is the physical garden, I indeed enjoy just sitting there and looking at the crops that are growing, the harvesting that needs to be done, the weeding that's a part of it all. In fact, there are those whom I have visited that have actually constructed a building in their garden area, almost a shrine, where they can come and find solace and maybe have a better time with God. I would hope that in your garden, wherever you are, that you have taken time to have fellowship with God. I don't know about it being a shrine, however. The people of Israel did not have a shrine. In fact, in their journey from the land of Egypt, we are told that they had a tabernacle. The tabernacle was a moving object. Whenever the people moved, the tabernacle moved. And it was a belief with some certainty and understanding that God was in that tabernacle. So it was always a case, wherever the people were moving to, God was with them. Not a permanent establishment, but a temporary one. Always wherever the people were and had their needs. When David became king of Israel, we are told that David wanted to build a building for God. This passage is a very interesting one, and I want to read it for you because it sort of summarizes David's intent. Now, we understand that he's settled. He's conquered his enemies. He's established himself as a king. He has overcome the enemies and the opposition within his own country so that the country is united. So after everything is settled, this is what David wants to do. After the king was settled in his palace, and the Lord had given him rest from all his enemies around him, he said to Nathan the prophet, "Here I am, living in a palace of cedar, while the ark of God remains in a tent." Isn't that interesting? That David somehow felt, because he was secure in his house of cedar, that God wasn't. That God somehow, living in a tent, needed more. So Nathan the prophet tells David, you can do whatever you want to do. And the intent of David was to build a palace for God. You ever want to do that? Build a palace for God? To house him? To secure him in your life, somehow with some physical structure? We do that many times with what we call church buildings, edifices. I am intrigued by the number of edifices that have been built to house God. The great cathedrals of Europe, by the way, so many of them remain empty today. No great big crowds flocking to find God or to worship him, but an empty building. So here's what God has to say about what we want to build. And it is God speaking. In the 7th chapter of 2 Samuel, the 5th verse, "Go and tell my servant David, this is what the Lord says. Are you the one to build me a house to dwell in? I have not dwelt in a house from the day I brought the Israelites up out of Egypt to this day. I have been moving from place to place with a tent as my dwelling. Wherever I have moved with all the Israelites, did I ever say to any of their rulers, whom I commanded to shepherd my people Israel, why have you not built me a house of cedar?" This is a very reflective passage, one that we could well heed in our lives today. We think of our own garden, the dwelling place of God. What do we need to secure God in our lives? Do we need a structure? Do we need to say we have to go to a certain place in order to find God? Many people mistake their religious devotion with that idea. Where is God? In my garden, he is everywhere. He is by every plant. He is by my watering system. He is by the seed that I put into the soil. He is by the soil. I'm not a pantheist where I believe everything is God, but I do want to say God is everywhere. I don't want to localize him. I don't want to restrict him. I don't want to minimize him. I want to expand him, to have him be a part of everything that I have in my life. And I pray that you will do that too. We don't limit God with a talisman, something we hang in our automobile or that we have in our homes. He's not on the cross that you may have on your wall. He's not in a picture. He's not in a statue. He's not even, quote, in a book which we call the Bible. The person of God transcends it. And I read for you the concluding remark, which I find so interesting. And it begins here again, 2 Samuel chapter 7. And I read these words today from verse 11. "The Lord declares to you that the Lord himself will establish a house for you. When your days are over and you rest with your fathers, I will raise up your offspring to succeed you, who will come from your own house for my name and from your body, and I will establish his kingdom. He is the one who will build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever." Who is God talking about here? He's talking about a descendant of David called Jesus Christ. Christ says, the house you need is me. Dwell within me and have me dwell within you. Wherever you are, whatever need you have, in the hospital, upon a deathbed, traveling down the road, working in your physical garden, tending to the needs of your family. That is the house of God that is centered in Jesus Christ. May you find that peace in your life today. Thank you for being a part of walking with God in the garden.